New Orleans on New Year's Eve 2024 was a city alive. Bourbon Street pulsed with jazz, neon lights, and thousands of revelers celebrating the end of the year. Among the crowd were families, football fans in town for the Sugar Bowl, and locals dancing in the streets. Security was present, mounted officers, metal barricades, and street patrols, just like every year. Everything felt under control. But a few blocks away, in a dim corner of a parking garage, sat a gray Ford F-150 Lightning, silent and still. Inside it was Shamsud-Din Jabbar, a 31-year-old former Army sergeant from Houston. He wasn't here for the fireworks. He was here to make a statement. The truck was packed, pressure cooker bombs sealed in coolers, an AR-10 rifle, a Glock 19, extra ammo, and a pair of smart glasses ready to record. Jabbar watched the crowd swell through his windshield. For hours, he had been monitoring police rotation and waiting for the perfect moment. At 11:52 p.m., he posted one final message in a radical Telegram channel. They dance while others die. Let the celebration end in fire. As the crowd chanted the final countdown, Jabbar shifted into drive. 10, 9, 8. The fireworks started. 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year. At 12:03 a.m., Jabbar sped out of the garage and smashed through the Iberville barricade, heading straight for Bourbon Street. He didn't hesitate. The truck barreled into the crowd, crushing people before they could run. Screams replaced music. Panic erupted. Within seconds, a party turned into a bloodbath. And Jabbar, calm and expressionless, recorded it all. Born Michael Jabbar in Corpus Christi, Texas, Shamsud-Din was a quiet, disciplined child. He joined the army at 18 and served 2 tours in Afghanistan. An IED injury ended his military career, leaving him with chronic pain and diagnosed PTSD. Returning home, he struggled to reintegrate. Jobs came and went. He avoided crowds, drank alone, and drifted from friends. In 2020, he converted to Islam, taking the name Shamsud-Din. At first, faith grounded him. He attended mosque, prayed regularly, and read Quran. But slowly, isolation crept in again. By 2023, he had stopped attending the mosque and turned to online forums. What began as religious exploration turned into extremist indoctrination. He found radical ideologies that echoed his bitterness toward the government, his military past, and the state of the world. By late 2024, Jabbar was fully radicalized. He believed America was corrupt, his service betrayed, and that his death could be a message. To neighbors, Jabbar was invisible. He worked a tech support job from home, rarely spoke, and paid rent on time. He wore plain clothes, jogged at night, and avoided eye contact. Nothing in his life raised suspicion. But inside, he was unraveling. He kept a detailed journal full of dark thoughts and violent scripture taken out of context. He practiced assembling explosives and watched attack videos late into the night. His military training became a tool for terror. He bought firearms legally, learned how to disable tracking devices in his truck, and deleted his digital footprint. By the time New Year's approached, Jabbar had gone completely dark. He wasn't just planning an attack. He was preparing to die. Jabbar didn't snap. His journey was gradual, driven by a twisted sense of purpose. He believed violence would cleanse hypocrisy and that he was chosen to deliver punishment. In late 2024, he began searching for targets. Times Square, Las Vegas, and D.C. all appeared in his searches, but New Orleans stood out, minimal vehicle barriers, massive foot traffic, and symbolic celebration. A perfect storm. He mapped routes, studied police presence, and purchased gear over several weeks, staying under the radar. To him, this wasn't murder. It was mission. A holy war. He believed his life had been used. And now, he'd use it for what he called justice. On December 28, 2024, Jabbar rented a Ford F-150 Lightning in Houston. Over the next 2 days, he bought timers, wires, nails, and other bomb-making supplies at hardware stores across Texas. He built 2 crude pressure cooker bombs and packed them in coolers, taping them shut and placing them in the truck bed. He left Houston on December 30th, traveling alone on back roads. He avoided highways and surveillance. He stopped only to pray and sleep briefly in rest areas. On December 31st, he reached New Orleans and parked in a garage near the French Quarter. He sat there for hours, silent, observing. At nightfall, he recorded his final video. In it, he said, "I was once their soldier. Now I fight for truth." He knew he wouldn't leave the city alive. New Orleans on New Year's Eve was always chaotic, but somehow beautiful in its disorder. Mounted police smiled as they moved through the crowd. Street performers juggled fire. Tourists stumbled from bar to bar, plastic cups in hand. City officials monitored live feeds from cameras around the French Quarter and confirmed, all looked normal. No one noticed the truck. Jabbar remained still in the dim parking garage. He hadn't eaten since morning. The back seat of the truck held bags of ammunition, a black tactical vest, and his Meta smart glasses, charging quietly on the dashboard. At 10 p.m., he watched police patterns and studied the gaps between patrol rotations. At 11:30 p.m., he filmed a 10-second clip. Tonight is not for victory. It's for justice. Meanwhile, officers like Lieutenant Kerry Dupree reported only minor disturbances, pickpocketing, a drunk man falling into a gutter, a couple arguing near Royal Street. Nothing suggested imminent danger. At 11:50 p.m., Jabbar disabled the internal GPS in the truck, wiped the touchscreen, and loaded his rifle. He breathed slowly. Focused. Ready. At midnight, fireworks exploded. Couples kissed. Crowds screamed. The new year had arrived. But for Jabbar, it wasn't a celebration. It was a trigger. At 12:03 a.m., Jabbar drove out of the garage and onto Decatur Street. He turned toward the Iberville barricade and didn't stop. The Ford F-150 picked up speed as it approached the crowd. One officer turned at the last second, shouting, "Truck!" The barricade shattered. Screams pierced the air. The truck plowed into Bourbon Street at full throttle. Within seconds, people were thrown into the air, crushed or pinned beneath tires. Music died. Panic surged. Blood stained the pavement. Jabbar swerved deliberately, hunting movement. He avoided trash bins but aimed for bodies. The Meta smart glasses recorded everything: chaos, screams, trampling, impact. After 90 horrifying seconds, he crashed into a parked service truck. He stepped out with the AR-10 and fired toward police closing in. Officers returned fire immediately. Within moments, Jabbar was dead, riddled with bullets beside the wreckage. The city's joy turned to horror. Over 14 civilians were killed, and 57 injured in under 2 minutes. The French Quarter, once a place of celebration, had become a war zone. The aftermath was confusion. People screamed, ran, fell, and hid inside restaurants and bars. Some threw up. Others helped strangers. Cell phones filmed everything, flooding social media with horror. Police cordoned off the area and called in tactical units. Medics treated the wounded on sidewalks using napkins, belts, and tablecloths. A young woman cradled her brother's body as cameras clicked. A tourist from Georgia held his crushed leg. The band that had been playing moments earlier used their cases to carry the injured. Officer Dupree walked among the chaos, jaw clenched. "This wasn't random," she said into her radio. He knew what he was doing. By 1:30 a.m., bodies had been counted. Emergency rooms overflowed. The FBI had been called. Journalists were already outside the perimeter. New Orleans, a city that danced through every tragedy, had just been sucker-punched on the happiest night of the year. By morning, the story was everywhere. Terror attack in New Orleans. Ex-soldier behind massacre. America's first 2025 tragedy. The mayor held a press conference at dawn. The governor called it a cowardly act of hate. The president issued a national address within hours. The victims were young and old. Locals and tourists. One was a college student from Alabama. Another was a woman celebrating her engagement. 2 children had been trampled. The city held impromptu vigils by noon. Blood was still drying on Bourbon Street as flowers piled on the sidewalk. Jazz bands played Amazing Grace. People wept openly. Online, Jabbar's final video spread fast. Telegram accounts reposted it as proof of justice. But authorities quickly removed the footage and issued warnings about sharing extremist propaganda. Grief gripped the nation. And behind that grief, a growing question. How did no one see this coming? The FBI arrived in force, securing Jabbar's truck and apartment in Houston. Inside the vehicle, they found bomb remnants, a journal, military gear, and printouts of U.S. drone strike casualties. In Houston, agents seized his laptop, which contained over 1,200 files related to extremist content, along with draft versions of a 16-page manifesto titled Reckoning. Digital forensics confirmed Jabbar acted alone, no terrorist group was behind him. But he had been radicalized. The FBI labeled it an act of domestic terrorism inspired by foreign extremist propaganda. His online trail showed visits to radical forums, encrypted chat rooms, and anti-American manifestos. He had methodically erased emails, used burner phones, and left no digital footprints in the final week. His apartment was clean. His will was printed and signed. The final line read, "I was trained to fight for them. Now I fight against them." Inside the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, analysts combed through Jabbar's writings, searches, and messages. His 16-page manifesto was chilling, not disorganized rambling, but structured, articulate, and ideological. It began with a statement. "America taught me how to kill. I just never imagined it would be them I killed for real." The document outlined grievances against U.S. foreign policy, drone strikes, and the hypocrisy he saw in a nation that sends soldiers to war, then abandons them. Jabbar described feeling used, discarded, and disillusioned. His tone was calm, resolute. He wrote about God, betrayal, and the decay of Western morality. He referred to his mission as a necessary act to awaken the blind. FBI psychologists concluded he wasn't mentally ill, but radicalized, a lone actor with military training, driven by vengeance masked as ideology. He had no direct links to known terror groups but had consumed a toxic cocktail of radical sermons, conspiracy theories, and veteran forums filled with anger. In one chilling line, he wrote, "They cheer beneath fireworks. I'll show them what real fire looks like." This wasn't sudden madness. It was slow, calculated, and terrifyingly deliberate. Investigators reached out to Jabbar's family, former military commanders, and friends. The portrait that emerged was familiar to many post-war stories. In the army, Jabbar had been respected, quiet, skilled, obedient. But after returning home with an injury and PTSD, he began to fade. The VA provided him limited counseling. He stopped answering calls. Even his mother said they hadn't spoken in 6 months. Former platoon members expressed disbelief and guilt. He was loyal. "Broken, maybe, but not this," said one. Another remembered how Jabbar would freeze when fireworks went off. His imam at a local Houston mosque said Jabbar had stopped attending in 2023. He isolated himself, the imam said. That's when the danger starts. Across the country, veterans recognized the pattern: trauma, rejection, isolation, and radicalization filling the void. One journalist called it a war that followed him home, and found a way to finish him. The names of the dead became national headlines. Ariana Ruiz, 21, was celebrating her birthday. Jerome Holloway, 38, had brought his kids to see fireworks. Emily and Carter Delaney, ages 7 and 9, were crushed in the stampede. Brandon Cook, 19, a freshman at Tulane, was trampled while helping others escape. Stories of survival poured out: a bartender who dragged 3 wounded tourists inside, a busker who shielded 2 kids, a nurse who performed CPR with her bare hands. The death toll stopped at 14, but dozens were hospitalized, many with permanent injuries. One victim lost both legs. Another suffered brain trauma. The psychological scars, though unseen, spread further. New Orleans declared a citywide day of mourning. Black ribbons were tied to balconies across the quarter. A moment of silence was observed across college football games on New Year's Day. The victims weren't numbers. They were dreams shattered. Lives stolen. Public outrage followed swiftly. How could this happen again? Another vehicle attack on civilians? Investigations found multiple failures. The Iberville barricade wasn't reinforced. The truck rental hadn't triggered any alerts. Jabbar's radical content wasn't flagged. City officials vowed reform. Federal funding was pledged to improve security at soft-target events. Events like Mardi Gras would see mobile vehicle barriers, AI surveillance, and stricter rental protocols. At a congressional hearing, one security expert testified. "We trained him to be lethal, then ignored every sign that he was turning that lethality inward." Critics argued the government failed both the victims and Jabbar, by letting a veteran fall through the cracks, and by not tracking domestic radicalization seriously. But reforms alone couldn't heal the wounds. Not when the pain was still raw. Months later, the French Quarter still bore the marks of that night. Blood had been washed away, but not forgotten. Sidewalk musicians played softer now. Tourists paused where the truck had stopped, reading memorial signs on the walls. Survivors attended therapy. Some families moved away. Others, like the parents of the Delaney children, became advocates for terror awareness and soft target protection. Shamsud-Din Jabbar was buried in an unmarked grave, disowned by his family. His name became taboo in the veteran community, spoken only in hushed regret. His smart glasses footage was never released. The government sealed it permanently. Too horrifying, they said. Too human. But the story lived on. Not because of Jabbar, but because of those who lived through him. The nation remembered the laughter that turned into screams. The celebration that became a nightmare. And a warning. Sometimes, the shadows aren't in the distance. They're already here.